awfully nice you are.
Brief Encounter director David Leigh once famously announced that reality is a bore. And there was a time when most of the jolly old British film industry agreed wholeheartedly. Oh, hard cheese.
Oh, I say, smashing cricket script.
For years, though, most of our films were only realistic about just one section of British society. Those nice middle classes who knew which way to pass the sherry. People who worked for a crust had roles too, of course, usually the gormless Bobby, the cheeky Cockney parlourmaid, or Dickie Attenborough being young and dependable in an engine room.
Keep it up! Stop star show!
Then sometime during the 1950s, there was a revolution. Suddenly, people like this bloke appeared on the screen. Folk with proper jobs found themselves trusted to hold down a serious bit of plot.
Can I help you?
Yes, I want a pair of shoes.
They turned out not to be boring at all. Some of them were even quite sexy.
You don't think I'm coming, do you?
No.
Ever since then, we Brits have become world leaders in what someone who clearly had a bit of a way with words once entitled social realism. It stuck. The term may be a bit rubbish, but the films are really very good, even if some of them feature the kind of language that you should never use in front of the servants.
Get him out, I'll kill him. Then I'll fucking kill you, and I'll kill your fucking slag shit family. I'll blow the fucking lot of you up. Get him out of my house now.
Really? This is the most recent example of a British director making a film on something he knows an awful lot about.
The big red ones.
Oh, you're not having them, sweetheart. Look at the size of them.
Oh, come on, Mum, you said.
Now listen, Ducky darling, the ones that you're looking at, these boots,
Yeah.
now they're adult sizes and you're a size 4. But these have just come in from London. Are you ready for these? These are fantastic. Mum,
Oh, look
have a
at them,
that.
Sean. They're absolutely lovely.
You want told one, they are.
Oh, my God.
They're nice, aren't they?
Absolutely.
I fucking want them.
If you swear, I'm sorry about that.
I'm fed up with superheroes saving the planet. I want films that challenge me and upset me and irritate me and make me laugh, where I can see recognisable human beings in them.
Where's my mum?
Now, look here. I really have no idea where your mother is, who she may be, or indeed whether you have one.
You want a fat lip?
No. What made this country great was a place for everyone, and everyone in his place. And this is my place.
Fascist.
My job is really to look at the world, look at how we live, and then somehow take it beyond that to get to the essence of things.
Mike Leigh's one of our social realist national treasures. The other's a chap with a reputation for making serious political films that actually contain more laughs than most British comedies.
The bathroom here, which I think you'll find very interesting.
I'd always worked with acts, as we used to call them, comics, turns.
Who are you? What is it? Get out of there!
People who brought the richness of their character into the film.
Everything seems to be working.
I prefer the grittier British film. I remember my dad having his door stopped, and people go, well, that couldn't happen, and you're going, well, it fucking happened. It happened because we were there and we had no money coming in for 6 weeks.
Choose life. Choose a job. Choose a career. Choose a family. Choose a fucking big television. Choose washing machines, cars, compact displays and electrical tin openers.
But sometimes films about poverty are entirely free of a moral message. The award for the best opening credits ever in British film goes to...
Trainspotting. Yeah! It's great. My grandparents hated it. I loved it.
When I first saw Trainspotting, blown away. Learned all the lines, bought the soundtrack. Didn't do heroin, obviously.
The opening scene of Trainspotting was so visceral, had such impact that I think from then onwards it was like you're on the beginning of a ride and we're never going to let you off.
I chose not to choose life. I chose something else. And the reasons? There are no reasons. Who needs reasons when you've got heroin?
Just like so many social realist films before, Trainspotting was based on a novel, but not just any novel. In Irvine Welsh's cult classic, There was no actual train spotting, for example. Quite a lot of drug taking, sex and violence, but absolutely no train spotting.
It was about betrayal and greed and the destruction of great friendships.
Everybody who touched the book knew it was a modern classic. It's Ulysses, in a way, in its own strange, modern way.
And nobody ever made a decent film of Ulysses. So when Boyle, producer Andrew MacDonald and screenwriter John Hodge acquired the film rights, many wondered if they could pull it off. They needn't have.
John did the most extraordinary job of turning that novel into a screenplay. Every chapter is written from someone else's point of view, and there's 25 characters in it as opposed to 6.
368, take one. And action.
Do you see the beast? Have you got it in your sights?
Yes, clear enough, Moneypenny. This should present no significant problems.
Welsh insisted on one thing, though. It may have been about drug addicts in Edinburgh in the bad old 1980s.
For a vegetarian, Rance, you're a fucking evil shot.
But they had better not make it worthy.
We perfected this social realism, depressing thing. And that's all people expect, and then this just came and blew everything out the water.
There have been a lot of drug films that are unwatchable, really. They're very noble, but they're unwatchable. You have to put that together then with what was happening in Britain, which is a lot of people were taking ecstasy.
People were also watching a lot of MTV, where this sort of weirdness happens all the time. Boyle made a movie for an audience who didn't care about the old rules of filmmaking or drug taking.
Question number 1. The human immunodeficiency virus is a...
retrovirus.
Retrovirus is the right answer!
There was a whole discussion at the time about glamorising drug use. I don't think it ever did. I just think it told the truth about it,
He's our son. There are heroin users who will tell you that it sugarcoats the heroin experience, but it's actually a film that dares to kind of say, do you know what? Kids take drugs in this country, and it's quite fun.
What's on the menu this evening, sir?
Your favourite dish?
Excellent.
Usual table, sir?
Oh, why, thank you.
Would sir care to pay for his bill in advance?
No, stick it on my tab.
I regret to inform, sir, credit limit was reached and breached quite some time ago.
Oh, well, in that case...
hard currency. That'll do nicely.
It was the first time that I can remember where literature, pop music and cinema all converged together. And it was all there in that amazing poster. It was like a challenge. It's like, hey, are you hip? Because if you're not hip, don't come see the fucking movie.
It seemed to be, at the time, there and now. There and then. Now and now, however you say it. Here and now.
Which is exactly what they tried to say about a film and a play that got people steamed up 40 years before. Look Back in Anger is usually credited with inventing social realism in Britain. And sometimes quite a lot more.
Look Back in Anger changed everything about Western drama. It was a vitriolic, passionate plea about the staid old establishment.
Stop ringing those bells! There's somebody going mad in here! I don't want to hear
Oh, stop shouting.
Written by John Osborne, the play was staged at London's Royal Court in 1956 and then remade for the screen with Richard Burton a few years later. That's him as Jimmy Porter, who spends most of the film cooped up in his flat, being very angry.
The little woman's family.
God help me, I'll go out of my mind if he doesn't stop in a minute.
Why don't you? That would be something, anyway.
There was something about the way he was able to deliver those lines, which are venomous and full of hate sometimes, but extraordinarily eloquent.
Are you all right? Well, does it look like it?
She's burned her arm. What a wanker Jimmy Porter was.
I'm sorry.
Verbose, rude, misogynistic.
You think I did it on purpose?
Clear out of my sight!
I remember thinking, why doesn't she just throw that iron at him?
Jimmy wasn't even working class, but then neither was the writer or most of the cast. That didn't seem to bother anyone in the 50s, though. The important thing was that it wasn't a film about jolly old Kenny Moore taking on the Luftwaffe.
How about you, Douglas? Look? Yep, got a 109 just south of Dunkirk. Smashed his tail up, cut it off like a knife.
Our generation believed that having gone through this dreadful time, there would be changes. And of course the Labour government did bring in lots of changes. But the 50s became rather square and dull because people had worked so hard to make it better.
Almost every British film at the time was made by what appeared to be middle to upper class ponces who were making films for their own type.
Soon, young Willie had a mysterious stranger to identify with. Someone who blew smoke rings, someone who was common, someone who got a lot of sex.
Because all trailers must carry a U certificate, we are unable to show you scenes which the censor has passed for adult audiences only.
Room at the Top starred Lawrence Harvey as Joe Lampton.
No. I do love you, Joe. I do. I do anything for you, Joe. Anything.
Although Harvey was a Lithuanian and actually quite posh,
Except what any girl will do for the man she loves.
he used an interesting northern accent to sleep his way up.
How much do you love me?
Very much. About £1 million worth.
That was the coming-of-age film for me, Room at the Top.
Joe, be gentle with me.
The idea that you get on in the world by having sex with the boss's daughter, I thought that was pretty shocking. Because I thought getting on in the world meant being good at school.
The adventures of Joe Lampton persuaded even the conservative British studios that tales of northern working-class life with a bit of smut thrown in would get an audience.
12, take 3.
David Lean wasn't available, but luckily there were already several young directors willing and able to make such films, mystifyingly dubbed kitchen sink.
I think you should be able to say or do anything on the screen. I don't believe in any form of censorship whatsoever. I mean, with all the dangers that it might expose people to, I still think that films should be made so that people can see anything that they want to see.
Tony Richardson, who directed Look Back in Anger, was one of a gang of young filmmakers, including former critics Carol Rice and Lindsay Anderson, with a fascination for life outside the drawing room. Long before anyone would trust them with a feature film, they had started out making documentaries, like this one, Mama Don't Allow.
They were trying to be film directors, but you don't just become a film director. You have to start somewhere, like making documentaries. But they couldn't get them shown, so they called it free cinema, and everybody came out wanted to see them.
There was this vast reservoir of interesting stuff going on, and nobody was looking at it.
Out it, boys! Out it! Center, please!
So these early films really were just a way of pointing the camera at things that the cameras should be pointed at, and really that's their importance.
Free cinema brought liberty to its makers, especially for Carol Rice. Just a year after making We Are the Lambeth Boys for the price of a few tins of Brill cream, he was pointing the camera at Albert Finney in the film that really changed the way people thought about what it was to be young and British.
When I first saw Saturday Night, Sunday Morning, I remember being made rather uncomfortable by its reality and the fact that it seemed to be about people I knew. Albert Finney is irritating and is annoying because he's arrogant, but at the same time, you really sense he's got a fantastic point, because he's one of the first characters that is actually saying, I can't stand this, I'm just a part of a machine.
£14 3 and twopence for 1,000 of these a day. No wonder I've always got a bad back. Don't let the bastards grind you down, that's one thing I've learned.
There were scenes in a factory. My dad worked in a factory. Most of my mates' dads worked in factories. And this was a part of my life. And that wonderful chippy character that Albert Finney played, don't let the bastards grind you down. I found myself saying that to all my mates.
Saturday Night, Sunday Morning was based on a novel. The press decided that its writer and screenwriter was an angry young man, but he was just from Nottingham.
Wanted a better person.
Mind what you're doing, can't you? That Arthur Seaton's gonna get a good rattling one of these days.
And he even looked good running for a bus. Finney was almost working class too, a grammar school boy from Salford who'd made good and gone to RADA, but he didn't let the elocution teachers grind him down.
Yes, my duck, what can I get for you? 2 packets of crisps, please.
Are you sure you can afford it?
Finney's co-star felt the same way.
It's Mum's anniversary, if you want to know.
Can't see your dad?
That's because he's not there.
Is he coming?
I shouldn't think so. He left her 15 years ago today and she's just having a drink on it. Just a minute, I'll take these to Mum.
Another bed of stuff, missus.
They never quite approved of me because I didn't fit into the classic mould of looking like a nurse and talking terribly like this.
What's your name then, Duck?
Doreen. Rotten name, ain't it?
So when I came along talking like that, it was when they gave me that part, it just released something in me.
Rice got his fair share of praise too, for knowing how Nottingham men drink their beer.
Seeing someone drink a pint in one had never been done before. People walked out the cinema, I was outraged. This doesn't happen. Well, it does.
Ned Leather nervously fingered his cap as he faced the portly owner of Allride's Mill. Sorry, lad, no work today.
As more and more films they called kitchen sink were commissioned, a kind of class war broke out. Not at the barricades, but the casting sessions.
Suddenly, working class actors were the thing, and the poor aristocrat actors couldn't get arrested for a while. There were no parts written for them.
All the great stars had modelled themselves on aristocrats. That was over. And if you were not working class and northern, to a degree, you didn't have any talent. There wasn't kind of a discussion.
You filthy pig.
All a bit boysy, though. It took Tony Richardson to create a female Finney, and he did that in A Taste of Honey.
Tony really had a knack for casting. And Rita was assistant stage manager on some northern touring rep company.
You're not much good at netball, are you, Joe?
No. The studios didn't want an unknown. They wanted, actually, Audrey Hepburn to play the role. She's a stunningly beautiful actress, but I don't think she would have been right for Joe.
Hard to imagine the star of Breakfast at Tiffany's up the duff from a black sailor in Salford, though, isn't it? Written by Sheila Delaney, A Taste of Honey was looser, more like documentary than what came before. Still the same obsession with the minutiae of working class life, though.
Hello.
A lot of the filmmakers who made kitchen sink dramas were from rather privileged backgrounds. There's a sense of them being tourists in the world of the working class and seeing in the working class a kind of energy and authenticity that they had lost.
Hey! You better put that light off. Might be after you.
Joe's friendship with the very gay Geoffrey was new. Earlier British films had been considered daring even to mention the subject, and here was a sort of Mancunian bohemia.
Jeff!
What?
You're just like a big sister to me.
It was the first time I'd ever seen anything to do with homosexuality on screen. And to see it dealt with in such a sensitive and positive way was an eye-opener.
No. Taste of Honey is the best of British kitchen sink drama. Rita Tushingham was a force of nature, and she encapsulated a kind of naive innocence that hadn't been shown on screen, and people believed it was real.
I didn't know anything about film, and I was quite naive, and I was a little overweight and a bit, you know. But you were just yourself. That's what you were.
Is that hard day, dear? His new play opens at National Theatre tomorrow.
Oh, that's good.
Good? Good? What do you know about it? What do you know about getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to fly to Paris, back at the Old Vic for drinks at 12? That's a full working day, lad. Just look at you.
Oh, Ken, be careful. You know what he's like after a few novels.
Kitchen Sink's enthusiasm for the poetry of the working classes was easy to send up. But social realism wasn't just about making stale British films a bit sexier. It was about confronting the issues that affected people's daily lives. There was one man who'd been doing that for years. Screenwriter Ted Willis.
Ted was everything you dreamed of that a good socialist working-class writer should be. He knew that people who live in council flats have just the same marital problems as people who live in nice houses. It's the same kind of thing.
That you, Jimbo?
Who else?
This is Woman in a Dressing Gown, the story of a marriage falling apart in a flat full of unironed washing. It appeared just as the press was getting excited about young men and how angry they were.
Ted Willis has been unfairly forgotten, and I think the reason why a film like Woman in a Dressing Gown gets overlooked often is because it's not a product of this angry young generation. You know, it was never on at the royal court.
Listen, Amy.
It's chilly in here. Shall I switch the fire on for you?
What?
Do you want the fire on?
No.
Willis wrote Dressing Gown as a TV play in 1956, and it was soon filmed with Yvonne Mitchell and Anthony Quayle.
Amy, you've got to divorce me.
You're joking, Jimbo.
No, I'm not, Amy.
It was the first time I'd seen a British film which took you into a world that you weren't entirely familiar with. And I also suspect that if Yvonne Mitchell had been an American actress, the quality of that performance, she would have ended up a major movie star.
Playing Georgie, the girl with designs on Yvonne's old man, was young Sylvia Sims.
I was involved in this group of people, Ted Willis being one. I hadn't got into the female emancipation thing. I learned that a bit later.
I love Sundays.
I wanted to be in meaty films.
Sylvia began her movie career as a sort of genteel and female James Dean in My Teenage Daughter. And later as a tart with a heart in Espresso Bongo.
You wouldn't walk in Cartiers and touch every stone.
But that was how social realism was sold. Not everyone in the audience was there for the grit. Some just wanted to see something a bit racy.
Come on, Alma! Ready, get dressed. How can you step if you're not dressed?
The work's aging you, Charlie.
Oh, it's like Smithfield meat market around here.
There's a kind of film that emerges in the 50s that deals with a social issue, but it does so in a way that doesn't forget that an audience have to be enticed in to see this film. So there's often a sort of exploitation element to it.
The issue of racial tension had its marketable side too. Since the war, new arrivals from the Caribbean had been encouraged to help Britain's labour shortage, but the settling in process wasn't exactly smooth. Ted Willis tackled the subject in a TV play called Hot Summer Night, about the problems faced by a black man and a white girl who fall in love.
Kathy, first time I see you up at night school, I think you're the most beautiful, lovely damn girl I ever see.
In 1961, it was made into Flame in the Streets, starring Johnny Secker as Peter and Sylvia Sims as Kathy.
And that looks dirty.
Yes. Is it right there aren't any fish in it?
Not here anyway. The water's too polluted.
Poor fish.
Wasn't like Harry Belafonte. Johnny was black and was quite something.
The film was set in similar London streets to those where race riots had erupted just a few years before, and in the other leading role was Earl Cameron.
Hey, man. What's all this excitement about? I only came to the country yesterday. Since I've been here, everybody lighting fires, crackers and everything.
November the 5th, man. Ain't you heard of Guy Fawkes?
I know all about the riots. I was right in the midst of it in London. Well, I've never been a tough guy, but I've never ran away either. I always stood my ground, always prepared to die rather than do that.
Earl was one of Britain's first black actors, having come from Bermuda in 1938.
You'd better go home, Judy.
Screen roles, however, were rare.
You hear me, woman? Go home.
Well, what are you going to do?
Nothing.
Film industry in England at that time was pretty rough. In fact, the only other black actor that I know that had any leading parts in a film was Paul Robeson, and that was before the war.
Men like Robeson had to put up with a lot, but as the black population grew, so did the racism of those who opposed them. Ted Willis knew that.
You've been telling your father you're going to get married?
Well, it hasn't come to that yet.
It's not true, is it? That he's in...
He's a West Indian? Yes. Oh, Mum, don't look like that. Come and sit down. Come on.
Brenda de Banzi was very brave to play the mother because she was mouthing off about all the things that people were saying.
Have you any idea at all where this could end?
When you meet him,
I don't want to meet him. I don't want ever to set eyes on him.
Willis knew all about the white working class and would one day write Harold Wilson's speeches for him. But there was one good reason that Flame in the Streets director Roy Baker got the details of black British life right: Earl Cameron.
I met with Roy Baker. He said, "You read the script?" I said, "Yes, I read it." I said, "But one point I'd like to get across. It puts black people, 20 living in one room."
Who is it?
I said, "It's not like that."
Excuse me, I'm sorry to trouble you, but could you tell me where Mr. Peter Lincoln lives?
Peter? He lives on the next floor, I think.
Thank you.
Also, that the homes are not very clean, and that's not true.
Kathy.
I had to talk to you.
You shouldn't have come here.
I had to come.
He was behind my shoulder, and it was great help. He would watch the scene and come to me and say he would do that, and no, but he wouldn't do that.
Yeah, let's liven him up.
Because I didn't want to make any mistakes with it.
The climax of the movie was a bonfire night rumpus.
Where you going? Get out of the way, man!
That, just like the real Notting Hill riot, showed the black population forced to fight back.
Out of the way, black boy!
Against racists with quiffs.
Come on!
It was a great surprise to me when the picture was finally finished and shown that some of the reactions were extraordinary. The sad thing was nobody could show it.
Take it easy. Peter! Break it up! Oh, Peter, oh!
If you showed it in a cinema after 3 days, you'd have a riot, either from the natives or from the immigrants, or both.
Of course, all that violence might easily have been blamed on the telly. Ever since TV had become a must-have gadget, social realist filmmakers had railed against the evils of the gogglebox. In the 60s, that began to change when ITV created Coronation Street, a small-screen version of Kitchen Sink.
This is BBC Television.
While the other side, there were only 2 channels, began doing all it could to attract a bit of rough.
I will kill you if you try and stop me.
As much back to this place as you. Say this, friend.
Say this to me! Me! Me!
This is an early TV drama from the director who wanted to make social realism real.
This place is mine! This place is mine!
I blew up in her face. I was Richard Burton. I was Albert Finney. Everybody I had ever studied at the pictures.
Free cinema made the working class a fit subject for films. But we felt in our youthful arrogance that there was a stage further you could take that.
No. No.
Ken Loach started out directing Z-Cars, but soon graduated to the Wednesday play, where his co-conspirator and political conscience was Tony Garnett.
We came into the BBC with a pretty aggressive attitude towards
what we were going to say and how we were going to say it. We were pushing for more social content and more political content in these dramas.
Now move out of the way. Leave the kid alone, will you? Now look, I didn't do me on job.
Now, Reggie, come on, don't be silly. Come on over here. Calm down.
And here's the Wednesday play that made the biggest push. Kathy Come Home, directed by Loach, produced by Garnett and starring Carol White.
Haven't you got a room in one of your houses? You don't care. You only pretend to care. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't think.
The reaction just stunned me. Questions in the House and uproar at the BBC. This seemed to just hit a nerve.
Kathy Come Home, seen by 12 million people, became a subject of national debate. Just what...
I hated the idea of these children not knowing. It was extremely realistic and heartbreaking. That's where documentary realism worries me a bit. People can act it without it actually happening to them, and the whole realism of the children screaming and shrieking in terror was real.
In 1967, Loach made it to the big screen for the first time with Poor Cow. A film that sometimes felt more like a thriller than a social realist movie. Poor Cow again starred Carol White, this time as Joy, a woman left to fend for herself after her crooked husband is sent to jail. Plenty of men wanted a little bit of joy while hubby was away. Her director wasn't happy, though.
I made so many mistakes when I began. It was set up as a feature film in the days when feature films were very cumbersome and old-fashioned.
156, take 2.
The crew was partly people I knew from working in television and partly people who came in from the feature business, and the two didn't really mix.
This time, much slower, and you can linger on the kiss much more.
It was an example of how not to produce a film.
Mellow is the feeling that I get when I see her.
One of the hardest jobs for Loach was directing the star the producer had insisted on. It wasn't easy for Terry Stamp either.
That was very good.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Getting better, aren't I?
you are.
You can see he's a little bit uncomfortable. Going, what have I let myself in for? I heard a story that he had a Rolls Royce at the time. Ken Loach is obviously a staunch socialist, so he had to park it round the back and not let him see that he'd turned up for work in a Rolls Royce.
Poor Cow is somewhere between a social realist film and a sort of exploitation film.
Got it? Cheeky. Yeah. I want you on the side of the wicker chair now. We're you behind on it, yeah. We're behind on the wicker.
That scene where Carol White submits herself to the amateur photographers club. I mean, it's a really gruesome scene.
A nice, warm smile.
Them snapping away with all their cameras, which it seems don't have film.
Yes, that's a good girl, yes. Get out of the way. That's lovely.
Now push him up a bit, girl.
But that's the image they chose to sell it with. The poster is a picture of Carol White being photographed, surrounded by all those cameras, and there's a speech bubble coming out of her mouth saying, well, a girl's got to make a living and a loving.
Loach had to make a living too, but he wanted to make a film that also stuck to his principles. So he got back together with Tony Garnett and headed north to shoot a low-budget film with a cast that contained nobody remotely like Terence Stamp. So this is Kes, about a boy who rears an abandoned kestrel, and it's really the first Ken Loach picture.
One of the ideas in the film is that everyone has lots of talent that remain hidden. So we thought, if that's true, then we must be able to find a boy like this anywhere, in any school.
Word got out amongst the kids. The producer and director were not going to be using professional actors. They wanted ordinary kids to play the parts. About a month after Ken Loach and Tony Garnett came to the school, there was this letter from Ken saying, "Dear David Bradley, I'd be delighted if you'd play the part of Billy Casper in the forthcoming film, A Kestrel for a Knave."
With a screenplay by Barry Hines from his own novel about a young schoolboy seemingly destined for a future down the local pit, the film's message was every bit as political as Loach's TV dramas, but delivered in a gentler, more naturalistic way.
Ken Loach, he's not a doctor standing somebody up in front of a room full of other physicians and pointing out and going, this is what's wrong with it. What he's doing is allowing them to tell their tale and putting them in a very comfortable place to tell that story.
Stop that infernal coughing. Every morning alike. Clear your throats on the way to school. Not here.
I've never, ever seen more authentic performances in any film than they are in Kes. I've nothing but wonder at how on earth they got those performances.
Come out, that boy! Who coughed? Mr. Hesketh. Somewhere near you, I think. McDowell. It was you. You were coughing.
It wasn't.
Yes, it was. I heard you.
It wasn't, sir.
Now, come on, don't argue. We know.
It won't be honest.
Headmaster, steady.
Even the adults in the cast were untrained. The only pro was Colin Welland, himself a former teacher, as the sympathetic Mr. Farthing.
All the characters that Ken cast were virtually themselves. Therefore, they just had to be themselves. Many of them were variety artists. And Brian Glover, he was a wrestler, so he was performing every night a week.
I'll have first pick, budget.
That's not fair, sir. You're going to have best players.
Do you want to play football? I don't do some maths.
Glover is the football coach. The bloke who down the pub, nobody would take him serious and everyone would tell him for fuck off. Manages to sort of be the grandest bully of all.
I'd fancied myself in the acting game. I had an equity ticket. I thought, well, why not try and use it? So I went down and I auditioned for Ken Loach and got the part as the games master, which was a rather special little part. I expected a little walk-on part. He gave me what turned out to be quite a starring role.
John goes through! Oh, never! Penalty! Never! Who do you think you are, Bremner?
I can remember Loach. He said, look, go down to Oakwell, which is Barnsley's football ground, and observe the finer points. And that's what good acting's about.
In real life, David Bradley was actually quite good at football, but as Billy Casper, his only interest is in birds. Yes, birds.
We had 3 kestrels. We named the birds after a particular shoe shop, Freeman, Hardy and Willis. Unfortunately, Willis wasn't up to scratch, and we had to release him into the wild.
Hope we're not too late.
You can actually tell the difference during the flying sequence when Billy is showing Mr. Farthing how he flies the bird. Hardy is the one that will hover and then swoop down, whereas Freeman would come at you eye level.
Well done, Casper. The most exciting thing I've ever seen in my life.
But the atmosphere of reality is also the work of cinematographer Chris Menges. He's the man who gave Loach what he wanted.
Up to then, we've been chasing around with a handheld camera, dashing about and panning and tracking and all that nonsense. And after that, we talked a lot about the camera being an observer and also the use of lenses, how a certain range of lenses will give you a sense of being a sympathetic observer.
You hang on here. I'll put him up first.
I'll never forget that scene in the shed with the kestrel and Billy. Loach just had a small hole and put the lens through. And we were on our own with the bird. A breathless silence. And you didn't have to act.
Although Kes has come to be regarded as one of Britain's greatest films, its young star, although still an actor, has never approached such a performance since.
Ken Loach has a great gift of working with people who are untrained. The flip side of that is that you've got somebody in a very raw state and you capture that on film, but in no way are they prepared for the reality of what it's like to be a professional actor for the rest of their life.
I became an actor because of the work, not because of the fame. I don't have any regrets about making the film. I had to accept at a very, very early age that I had already achieved what most actors want to do in their careers.
social realism isn't all about going down the pit and having your kids taken off you. It's about dancing and snogging and wearing open-toed sandals. Once the factory workers had been turned into heroes, in came the teenage rebels, and you could tell they wanted to smash the system and live fast and die young because they said things like this.
Daddy-o, I'm over and out.
Play it down, doll.
Well, you've got to live for the kicks. That's all you've got.
Then the beat.
Tell me, how did you find America?
Turn up to Greenland.
Has success changed your life?
Yes. I'd like to keep Britain tidy.
Are you a mod or a rocker?
No, I'm a mocker.
As yet more drugs were consumed, things got colourful. And the 60s started turning into the decade TV archive researchers love. Young audiences began to look for rebellion in their movies, and amazingly, it was one of the kitchen sink pioneers who rose to the challenge with an unlikely hit.
You three have become a danger to the morale of the whole house, and we've decided to beat you for it.
I serve the nation. You haven't the slightest idea what it means, have you?
You mean that bit of wool on your tit?
Lindsay Anderson, when we did If, totally attacked the very heart of the British establishment, the public school.
The angles of the one equal the angles of the other. Understand, Pudding? Yes, sir. Good.
I'd been to a horrible minor public school. I won't name it, it's just too awful to think about. And it represented everything I disliked. And the public school that was in If was very, very similar.
Right, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up.
People felt liberated by it. And the ones that felt the most liberated were the ones that had been to a public school.
And poshness was the secret of its power. This wasn't a gaggle of middle-class talents dragging up as fashionably working class. It was set in Cheltenham. There had been school rebellion films before, but never one quite like this, and no rebel quite like Malcom McDowell.
McDowell has the kind of wholly innocent character, particularly when confronted by authority. He had a kind of weird innocence that was underpinned by some sort of wickedness, never more so than in If.
Of course, no account of public school life would be complete without a flogging scene.
I remember opening the doors and looking at them. I mean, I thought I was looking at them pleasantly, but because I've got such a weird face, it looked like, you know, up yours. Mick Travis hated authority. But it's one thing to be beaten for doing something wrong, but for having an attitude. And Lindsay gave me the most beautiful piece of direction. With my back to the camera, he said to me, just do this. From the back, it's stunning.
And this is what was happening while the film was being made. Student rebellion put down with tear gas and water cannons. Mick Travis's uprising brought the Paris and Prague of '68 to the public school dorm room.
One of the jobs I had to do was making the collages in the boys' studies. And I remember cutting out newspaper photographs of demonstrations and all the trouble in Paris. It was so of the moment. It's like reading an account of the inside of your head in 1968.
Anderson might have spent most of his career advocating realism, but for If, he added an element of fantasy that only gradually becomes clear.
A lot of the things that Mick Travis does that are outside of the school are actually going on in his head.
Go on. Look at me. I'll kill you.
Whether he actually does steal a motorbike and drive off to the cafe and have the encounter with the girl, or whether he's just imagining that. I think it's best viewed from that perspective rather than thinking it all happens literally.
It might only be a movie, but did this really happen, or was it all just make-believe?
The only thing I did find a bit disturbing was killing them all off at the end with a machine gun.
Bastards! Bastards! Bastards!
Much as I despised this particular school, the idea that I would do that was going a little bit far for me. And of course, what it really shows is how I believed in the rest of it.
Boys, I understand you. Listen to reason and trust me. Trust me.
By the early 70s, toffs with machine guns had been replaced in the public imagination by a fear of what our own children were getting up to. Youth cults were on the rise. Nightmare or fantasy, depends which side you were on.
Well, if it isn't fat, stinking Billy Goat, Billy Boy in poison. How art thou, thou globby bottle of cheap, stinking chip oil?
Let's get her, boys!
Malcom McDowell went from the embodiment of 60s revolutionary chic in If to the leering face of 70s violence in A Clockwork Orange. The film that, 25 years before Trainspotting, was every teenager's must-see.
No film has had the effect on me that Clockwork Orange had. I saw it when I was 14. Some kid in our class snuck in early in the week, and then a couple more went a bit later in the week. And by the end of the week, we'd all snuck in to see it.
Your heart's in your mouth. You're 14 and you think, they're not going to let me in.
The police! Come on, let's go!
And rather like buying your first drink, two, just me and him, just going in. Just two, just going, what's this film? Oh, yeah, we're going. So, please. And she just went ka-dunk, and we were in.
Anthony Burgess wrote the novel on which A Clockwork Orange was based, and he was a man who made a career from winding people up. Stanley Kubrick's film did that too, because it took a recognisably real picture of Britain and used satire to upset quite a lot of folk with dog collars and mayoral chains. They could see the violence, and that stopped them from seeing the jokes. Or perhaps some of them were Gene Kelly fans who thought Kubrick had gone a bit too far.
We had no idea how to play this particular scene. There was nothing satiric about it, it was just plain nasty. Stanley came over to me and he goes, "Can you dance?" And, "Can I dance?" And I suddenly went into Singing in the Rain. I'd lived the whole thing, and he just stuffed his handkerchief in his mouth. He was laughing so hard.
But Kubrick was dismayed to find very few people, sophistos mostly, got the joke. Mary Whitehouse might have hated it, but as for the people who loved it...
The film came out, and it was adopted by the sort of audiences Anthony Burgess and Stanley Kubrick were afraid of, and felt there was something really admirable about Alex and his droogs going out and beating and raping and vandalising everything in sight.
I remember driving around Hammersmith. As I'm sitting in the traffic, 4 guys in the white things with the bowlers come out of the tube station. And I'm thinking, oh my God. And that's when you know that it's really getting into the psyche of the nation.
After being blamed for just about every act of random violence in Britain, Stanley Kubrick banned his own film being shown, something he managed to enforce in the UK until his death in 1999.
We saw it that once, and then you could never see it again. It wasn't in the cinema, you couldn't buy the video, it wasn't on TV. If Kubrick wanted to close down the effect of Clockwork Orange, he went completely the wrong way about it, because it just made it all the more powerful.
For the rest of the decade, there was little point sneaking into a British movie, whoever the director was. Only Quadrophenia, a rock opera about what the mods and rockers had got up to years before, was anything like proper realism. We were better off watching TV.
There's flares there, too.
Oh, yeah.
Got all this rubbish. You want to get this cleared out.
Who does?
You do.
If you want it done, you can do it.
Anywhere around the world, if you'd said British cinema, they would say, well, there is no British cinema.
That's Mr. Butcher.
Who?
You remember from school.
Oh, yeah.
British film from the late 60s to the early 80s was alive and well and hiding in television.
Mike Leigh was the director who wanted to change the way TV drama was made, the man who invented a very British impro.
Mike starts without a script and works individually with the actors to create a character and then puts them together. What you have to do is become this character, and you invent a whole history, and there's loads of stuff that you know about the character. Like a huge well of experience that you've dug and you can draw up from when you need it.
Are you into the French poets, then?
No.
Adrien Henry?
He's English, actually.
See? The name like that?
It's a very organic experience. You only know what your character knows. You don't know what anybody else is doing. And I remember Mike saying, I've got absolutely no idea what this film's going to be about, but I can guarantee you that there will be one in 8 months' time, but I don't know where we're going with it or what we're doing.
Come here.
It all started because Leigh was once an actor too.
Look at that.
That's him playing dumb in May Gray.
Did you ever see your skipper with that raincoat?
The fact that I did train as an actor at RADA and I found it a pretty dead experience lies at the centre of my whole approach to actors.
Where should we start?
I thought we'd start like improvise things, right?
The main thing that we didn't do as student actors was to get out there and look at the real world and research.
Right.
In those days, it was regarded as rather pretentious and wanky.
I'm very happy, Keith.
Yeah, so am I. Good night.
Good night. Guess Prudence.
Leigh became a TV star in the 1970s, with play for todays like Nuts in May, about people with funny teeth going on holiday in Dorset.
Stop! Don't! Look, don't you let me over! Not fair, is it, Keith?
I'm going in at the top.
Oh, no.
It was good, but it wasn't a Ken Loach film. Leigh seemed to be playing class confrontation for laughs.
Bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith.
When this woman arrived at number 10, things got serious for Britain's TV realists. While Ken Loach gave up drama altogether to shoot documentaries, Stephen Frears made My Beautiful Laundrette. He wanted the movie to overthrow Mrs. Thatcher. It didn't. Mike Leigh stuck with the telly and made a film about what it was like to be working class when there wasn't any work.
Meantime was a very important film. It dealt with unemployment, looking at it through the perspective of a particular family.
Not enough legs on it.
We were very mixed up. We lived in a block of flats in Hackney and I had a little brother.
Where you been? Go down the pub?
No, I went down the pub.
Did you?
No, I went up the pub, muppet. He kind of lost a shilling and found sixpence. Called him the muppet. And I was trying to help him. But some people think I was just evil.
Well, kiss a fag. One with me, one with Ron, later on.
Behind the broken specs, for one of his first TV roles, was a young Tim Roth.
I was very nervous around Phil.
Turning like that, Kermit.
Because he was in Quadrophenia. He was a star. I was in awe of him. I wanted his autograph, more than anything.
Meantime didn't exactly make Mrs. Thatcher jump on a chair and scream, but it was appreciated by people who lived in the circumstances depicted in the film, and that's not true of all social realism.
There's lots of people you meet that are sort of buffs of Meantime. So Quadrophenia's all right, pal. Meantime.
Hurry up! Go on, kick the whole place down, why don't you? What's the matter, Colin? You got your zip stuck or something?
I'm next.
Yeah, I know you're bleeding next.
When Blur asked me to do Park Life, they were all meantime freaks.
Right, Colin, that's it. Out you come.
He got the runs, has he?
Stupid.
That's bleeding time.
It was just before Mike Leigh made it into movies. He just walked right through me. It was his last good film.
Here, have a look at this. You want to come and live round here for, anyway?
Well, they buy these houses for sod. All they sell them for a fortune.
Ain't an home, though, is it?
No, it ain't. It's a capital investment.
Almost 20 years after making his debut with a low-budget, Bleak Moments, Leigh got back to the big screen with high hopes. Impro aside, this one felt personal.
Don't think no one's in. They've gone to their country match and...
All of my films are political in the sense that they look at how we live our lives. But High Hopes specifically deals with questions of how to be political and how to deal with your convictions.
Cyril and Shirley are a left-minded couple trying to hold their nerve in Thatcher's Britain. And if ever there was a character who represented the thoughts of Mike Leigh, then it might just be Cyril. And not because of the beard.
He's a bit big, isn't he?
He was a giant.
No, I mean his head.
All Mike's films are personal. It's just the way he does them. Cyril was fairly close to Mike in lots of ways. There's a scene where they go to Karl Marx's tomb in Highgate Cemetery. And Cyril says, you know, there would have been no welfare state without this man. There would have been no this, there would have been no that.
By the year 2000, there'd be 36 TV stations, 24 hours a day, telling you what to think.
They've planted them trees right on top of them graves up there.
Pissing in the wind, isn't it?
I think it is a real bitter disillusionment that that socialist dream didn't work, and Cyril, as an intelligent man, couldn't ever see it working.
What would you rather have, boy or a girl?
Don't mind, really. One of each. What would you rather have?
I'd rather have a rusty spike shoved up me.
Underneath, he felt the same as Shirley. It's about caring. What Cyril was worried about is having children in a world like this. But society's always been hostile in some way or other, so you have to sort of just find the way that's right for you.
I ain't got me cap in.
What happened to Cyril was that he realised he would have to take responsibility for some things. If he had children, he would have to take responsibility for them. And he realised that whether he liked it or not, he would have to take responsibility for his mother.
Here's King's Cross, look.
The end shows Mike Leigh getting kinder to his characters and then getting nicer to each other.
And here's St Pancras.
Station?
Yeah.
They go up on the roof, and it's not a very high roof, but it's a roof, and you can see London spread out before you.
What's this? It's my garden, innit?
Through there, look. St Paul's Cathedral. Yeah. Like a tit, isn't it?
Shut up.
Come and have a look at the trains.
It's an optimistic ending of a man saying, OK, you know, it's not perfect. The world won't ever be perfect. But if we wait for a perfect world, then we'll never do anything.
It's where Dad used to work, isn't it?
I know.
I know you know.
You want to go on a train?
Not today.
No, when it's warmer. Do you want to sit down?
It's the top of the world.
I'll get on the camera and organise it in a minute, but just so that Dick can see generally and lovely how it shapes up. OK?
Leigh was making us laugh less and cry a lot more. One film especially sealed his newfound reputation.
Hello? I'm sorry to trouble you, but I'm trying to locate a Cynthia Purley. It's about Elizabeth Purley.
Oh, she's dead. Look, sweetheart, she's my mother. She went in 1961.
No, I mean baby Elizabeth Purley.
Baby?
Secrets and Lies was our breakthrough.
Look, I'm sorry, I know this must be a shock to you.
We got the Palme d'Or at Cannes, 5 Oscar nominations. Though we didn't win anything because it all went to the English patient. It was a box office success.
Secrets and Lies is definitely the film where the critics and the general public decided that Mike Leigh had discovered his heart. There was a general acceptance that Mike Leigh had given up being despising of his characters and that he'd actually learnt to love them.
Darling, I got pregnant when I was 15. I didn't know she was going to come looking for me, did I?
Brenda Blethyn might have got the plaudits of Cynthia, the mum who's reunited with her daughter.
So where's the bolt of lightning?
But it was Tim Spall as her brother Morris whose speech had us all in tears.
Secrets and lies. We're all in pain. Why can't we share our pain? I've spent my entire life trying to make people happy, and the three people I love the most in the world hate each other's guts. I'm in the middle, I can't take it anymore!
It's a great privilege to work with them on characters because you do know the character will be served. Sometimes you'll have a character that doesn't say anything or says very little.
I'm sorry, Hortense. You wanted to find the truth and you were prepared to suffer the consequences. And I admire you for that.
He's one of the only filmmakers who really does concentrate on those people who aren't communicative. A writer might go, how can I write this character? He doesn't say anything. These characters end up being the heroes.
Mike Leigh has rarely taken his camera back to the Salford streets where he grew up. But some directors wanted to stay and play out on the cobbles, even when the cobbles had been torn up and replaced with technology parks and shopping centres. The cinema of Terence Davies is one in the grip of its director's past, a sort of northern working-class paradise.
Perhaps all children think their families are magical. Cut. I thought mine was utterly, utterly unique. I mean, I just loved listening to them. And when they were all together, it was so unutterably magic.
Davies' debut feature, Distant Voices, Still Lives, took the story of his childhood in Liverpool, standard social realist territory, and transfigured it into a kind of dream. Deprivation became a poetic state.
Say good night to your dad, kids. Good night, Dad.
Good night, kids. What other filmmaker would so relentlessly have put into his film sequences when people, without any compromise at all,
Come on, Mickey. Give us a song.
sing
Pack up all my care and woe.
in a way that is both whimsical and touching?
Bye, bye, blackbird.
Oh, God blimey. You're not singing again, are you, Mick?
Listen, bloated tonsils. Just because you're dead miserable doesn't mean to say the rest of us have got to go around looking like keep death off the road.
What filmmaker would have done that without a sense of entertainment value that comes from the great musicals of the 50s?
My elder sister took me to see Singing in the Rain, my first film, and what a revelation that was. I remember when the curtains went back, the audience gasped. Can you imagine that now? And you didn't think, I am living in a deprived area, I am in a slum. You didn't come out after seeing All That Heaven Allows or Magnificent Obsession and think, oh, we live in a dump. You just thought, oh, doesn't the rain look fabulous on the street now?
I can be happy.
Terence Davies came to film late and only got his chance to direct because the British Film Institute gave him a tiny budget to make 3 semi-autobiographical shorts.
Oh, man.
The films might not have the colour or romance of Distant Voices, but they reveal much about growing up gay before it was legal.
Who's a fruit, then? Hey.
From primary school to secondary school, I was beaten up every day. I didn't know I was gay then, but clearly they smelt it. And also, I spoke like this, you know, I sound like the Queen Mother. I mean, no wonder they beat me up all the time. No, really. You take it slowly, there's nothing to do, nowhere to go, you really want to go with him.
Since making Distant Voices, Still Lives and the companion piece, The Long Day Closes, Davies has struggled to find financial backing for his films. He shot his last movie in 2000, an adaptation of an Edith Wharton novel. But it's his vision of a lost Liverpool that still commands attention.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, rack 'em up!
Distant Voices Still Lives is a film about memories. I nearly dropped dead in the cinema because I felt like somebody had been over my shoulder and watched my childhood and pilfered bits and pieces from it, because there was so much in that movie that I could relate to.
But the North doesn't have a monopoly on tough childhoods or filmmakers keen to turn them into movies. Created and partly paid for by Gary Oldman, Nil by Mouth was a bloody hunk of social realism, still twitching on the slab.
I first saw Nil by Mouth when it came out in the Brixton Ritzy on my own in an afternoon, and there were about 12 other people in the cinema. And I thought it was going to be hard work. Ray Winstone's performance is a revelation. It's so powerful what he does in it. From the first frame of the film, he's just ordering drinks at the bar. And he does it with such sort of menace. Asking for a tray. Have you got no ice?
Have you got no ice?
He plays that damaged lad that I know, but I don't have the nerve to get too close to. Can and will turn around and savage anyone.
Can I pick them olives?
Well, drink it or fucking wear it.
You think I some cola?
No.
Where are you going now? I've got this seat here for you.
I'll be back in a minute.
Well, where are you going with all these?
Nil by Mouth is a wonderful film with wonderful performances. It's just not exactly what one would choose to go to on one's birthday.
Now, where's my fucking bit of gear? I don't know what you're... Don't fucking lie to me!
For some people, though, your birthday is just another day when someone belts you across the skull.
Now, Bill, where's my fucking...
Gary Oldman grew up in the places where the film is set.
Mind your own fucking business! Fuck you! Don't swipe at his cup!
Many of the characters are based on people he once knew. Oldman had a difficult relationship with his father as well, although he was nothing like the Ray Winstone character. That came from the director's own experience of alcohol addiction.
When you look at Gary Oldman's direction, it's like he needed to see if he could do it himself. And I'm so glad it's the only thing he's directed, because he probably thought, I'm never going to do anything as good as that again.
I hadn't quite focused in on what it was going to be about, but I knew I was going to come back to South London. I started to write, in fact, about the heroin addict in the film, Billy. There was a scene where he went to his mum's, and I started to write the mother, and I thought, God, these women's voices, these women are interesting.
Fish gotta swim and birds gotta fly.
It was so important to me to do this authentically, with no sentimentality.
Loving that man of mine.
Nil by Mouth, in its portrayal of British culture, has an element of nostalgia to it, to the point where it's almost like resurrecting some things that are almost bygone.
Ain't no home to me.
It's an old-fashioned movie. There's got these pub songs where grandmothers sing Can't Help Loving That Man, a song that I doubt people were singing in South East London in 1997.
Winstone was an old hand at rough stuff. He'd been raising his fists since he made his screen debut 18 years before, in a film that was just as tough.
I went to see Scum a lot. I thought the performances were incredible. Ray Winstone's performance in Scum specifically was the reason that I wanted to be an actor.
Scum was directed by the late Alan Clark, a man who, had he lived, we might now think of in the same way as Ken Loach or Mike Leigh. That's certainly how he's regarded by those he worked with.
In my mind, directors were posh blokes, but Clarkey was very down-to-earth, Liverpudlian, Everton supporter. He was very, very down-to-earth.
Yeah, let's do one. OK.
He was the real thing. He was much more working class than all of us.
He's going to have the ball in his hand, right? Go down, and he's just got to thump a couple of people on the way.
He had an authenticity to him. He was always a much harder customer to deal with than I was.
Move, you spastic bastard!
Scum first came to attention as a BBC play for today. Its script was worked up from the testimony of real-life Borstal boys.
Because we're going to have your stinking everything, that's for gardeners, right?
But it was never shown. The BBC made it and the BBC banned it.
Today, the BBC itself has been in the news. Alistair Milne, BBC Television's managing director, and Bill Cotton, the controller of BBC One, have banned a play already filmed at a cost of £120,000.
Scum sat on the shelf for years. But then a producer decided that even if the BBC wouldn't screen the film, the cinema chains might not be so squeamish.
I heard about Scum because the BBC weren't going to transmit it. And so I immediately got the word out that I had some money and I would be interested in looking at Scum with a view to remaking it.
The cast was reunited with just a few minor changes to recapture what had proved so shocking first time out.
Right, Carlin, I'll run this fucking gaff, and you're dead if you come any of it in here.
I don't want no trouble, so just piss off and let me get on with time, all right?
We'll give you time, you bastard.
There's a lot of real hits, and he was very much for that sort of thing. But it makes the film in many ways because there was quite a bit of underhand hatred going on.
Carry on.
It was like If for people whose parents couldn't afford the fees. And the film's most famous moment saw Winston's character Carlin getting his own back with an improvised kosh. But don't worry, no actors were harmed in the shooting of this scene.
You're in my bleeding way.
It's all right, man.
What's up with you, weirdo? You want to strike me, do you?
Ray put 3 snooker balls in a sock and walks past John. As they do, Ray puts his hand behind his back and they do a switch. And he comes back with 3 paper and mache balls and hits me with those.
Back, Ross! I'm the daddy now. Next time I'll fucking kill you!
That's why I don't get really as hurt as it looks like.
I predict a riot. Boys kicking off, authority figures running for their lives. Scum was the perfect teen movie for less than perfect teens.
We were all immensely proud of Scum because it did that magical thing, which is present something that we felt was important to present and reach a very large audience. It was the #1 film in Britain when it was released.
After Scum, Clark would have no trouble raising the cash for a big-budget commercial movie, but he chose to go back to television for a drama called Made in Britain. Before proving he didn't just make tough, blokey pictures with Rita Sue and Bob too. A sort of social realist sex comedy.
You took your fucking time, didn't you?
I actually met Alan for one of the parts in Rita Sue and Bob too, but I didn't have big enough knockers.
Well, she's my baby.
Jane's moment, that's her at the back trying to keep up, arrived just a few years later. Clark got hold of Road, a play by Jim Cartwright about hard times in the 1980s, and put it before the cameras on the streets of a deserted mining town.
He was a fantastic filmmaker. His films got stranger and weirder and more interesting as he got older.
I don't think I realised at the time, because I was very young, how iconic he was. A very brave filmmaker.
Alan Clark died of cancer in 1990, aged just 54. He may not have made as many movies as Loach or Leigh, but he's been just as influential.
Because they were so stripped down and so graphic, I think they communicate really well on the small screen as well as the big screen. I mean, it clearly inspired Trainspotting. The energy of the characters, the design of it. The walls are stripped, and the use of music.
never was another social realism boom, a moment when going to see a film about being hard up was a fashion statement. But until the classless society really arrives, there'll always be a place for films that make drama out of deprivation. In 2001, this film ensured that a little bit of reality was visible at the multiplex.
Last Resort is really tremendous. It's about a rather dour subject, and it's set in a rather dour place. But there's something incredibly visually, poetically beautiful about it.
Last Resort, about a Russian woman and her son who are billeted to Margate, along with several other refugees and asylum seekers, used a topical issue to inspire an offbeat tale.
I want to go to London.
No, you can't do that.
Why?
You've applied for political asylum. The world and his wife would go to London if we let them.
Crazy, my fiancé in London.
Yes, but your application is being processed here.
It's seen as the first film about the issue of refugees, you know, but that's a complete accident. The heroine is not a refugee at all. If anything, she's a bogus refugee. She asks for political asylum by accident, out of sheer confusion and despair.
Accidental social realist Paul Pawlikowski came to Britain from Poland in the early 70s. Although he'd seen and loved Kes without understanding a word, Paul had no ambition to emulate Loach. Like Ken, he joined the BBC, but ended up making documentaries.
I didn't have the sort of humility of a verite Anglo-Saxon director who just sort of sits back and observes and, you know, follows it for weeks. I was too lazy for that. I was always looking for the interesting character, interesting shot. And as a result, I made these sort of slightly, you know, original documentaries.
Pawlikowski's second feature was called My Summer of Love. It's set in the post-industrial north, and it has the freewheeling, fresh quality of the best of British social realism, but it also has something else.
You all right? Did you crash or something?
No, I was just resting.
What's your name?
Mona.
My Summer of Love, from its very opening, looks like a French movie. I think that's what British cinema might need to do, is to acknowledge their European influences rather than their Hollywood ones these days.
I'm not terribly interested in the way society looks to the naked eye. I'm much more interested in some kind of a distilled version. I wanted to show Britain in a slightly different light, frame it differently, make it look strange, make it look different. So people wouldn't shrug their shoulders and say, oh yeah, well, we know that.
2002 saw the release of another film about teenagers set in an equally unexposed part of the country, the Scottish port town of Greenock. Sweet 16 wasn't by a new director, though. It was the latest British movie from Ken Loach, the man who gave us Kes.
Use your fucking manners! How am I supposed to see a bike parked there?
It's the story of a boy whose mother's in prison and is in a relationship with a guy who's dealing in drugs.
Hey, where's my helmet? I don't know where your helmet is. Well, there's a wee bastard. There's your helmet.
And the boy wants to get his mother away from that. Therefore, he wants money. He wants to find her somewhere to stay. And, of course, the only way he can raise that is by dealing.
Sounds grim, doesn't it? Sweet 16 certainly does have its gritty moments, but it's very funny too. Mixing hard drugs with thick crust pizzas.
You better be, because I've got an offer to do.
It's a huge misconception with Ken Loach's films that they're all depressing.
There you go, mate. Cheers. Here's your pizza, mate.
All these films have got so much proper, good working class humour.
Fuck's sake. See if you drove half as much as you got, mate, get somewhere.
Sweet 16, it's quite tender and funny before it starts going on, right? Kids shouldn't be taking heroin or be forced to deliver pizzas or, you know, watch out, Britain, these things are bad.
That humorous side was first explored in 1990, when after a long spell making documentaries, Loach rediscovered what got him into films in the first place, with Riff Raff.
I wanted to get back to working There's drama on the streets.
There's people walking past you, don't be bugger.
So that meant we went back to the vitality associated with 16mm, the kind of spontaneity of being able to capture the action as it's happening. And from then on, I hoped to find the energy we had in Up the Junction.
Riff Raff and Ken's next film, Raining Stones, were released as Margaret Thatcher left office. They were raspberries to send her on her way and to show what Loach thought she'd done to British society.
When you're a worker, it rains stones 7 days a week, and then it pisses down on me. We never invented the system, son, but it's up to us to change it. So, flag and match. Oh, bloody hell. Smackheads.
When I saw Raining Stones, I thought, I've learnt more about what it's like to live in Britain in the last 2 hours than I've learnt from watching the news and reading newspapers for the last 10 years.
Lads, can we see in your firing positions here?
But Loach hasn't always made films about the social realities of today. Last year, The Wind That Shakes the Barley was a highly political costume film about the violence in Ireland during the period of partition.
I was on the jury in Cannes when it won last year. It took about 5 seconds for that decision to be made when it came to the meeting, and it was unanimous.
The Palmador goes to Ken Loach.
Suddenly, a strange thing happened. British social realism was internationally acclaimed.
Hello, George. Oh, hello, Peggy. What you need's a nice hot cup of tea. And you want a biscuit, Peggy, I shouldn't wonder.
Vera Drake was up for Oscars too.
How'd that go the other week? Same as usual. Nervous little thing, wasn't she? I put her right. Set her mind at rest. You always do, don't you?
But before Leigh shot this film about abortion in the 1950s, he made a film called All or Nothing, set on a crumbling council estate in South London.
That was shit.
Rory? What? You don't need to talk like that.
Fuck off.
Rory, will you stop being rude to me, please?
Say, what is your problem? I only said I didn't like my dinner. I can't do nothing round here without you having a go at me. You do my fucking head in. Why don't you fuck off?
It's a great film, but almost nobody went to see it. They went to see Vera Drake in droves.
We need to talk to Mrs. Vera Drake. What's all this about?
You can watch it and weep. Congratulate yourself that you live in a more enlightened age. You can't do that with All or Nothing. And it wasn't the first film to find success by appealing to that instinct. Billy Elliot used the miners' struggle to pull off an international hit.
Plenty of boys do ballet, you know.
Do they, Nick? What boys do ballet?
Nobody round here, but plenty of men do.
Puffs.
Not necessarily puffs.
Who like?
What about that Wayne Sleep? He's not a puff.
Huh?
He's as fit as an athlete.
Great miners' strike of 1984 to 1985 is the great defining moment in post-war British domestic politics. For all of us who were around at that time, it still brings up incredibly strong emotions and strong feelings that sort of never really quite been forgotten.
It was a memory not shared by the young chap making his screen debut as Billy. Not surprising, really. He wasn't born until the year after it was all over.
As a kid, I didn't really understand the politics of it. During the making of it, I never stepped outside of the character and the dancing to actually look at what was happening all around him.
Spin it, Mr. Braithwaite, spin it! Come on, spin it!
His only goal is to escape. It's about escapism for him, you know, dancing is his ultimate escape.
Pirouette and down.
Up you get.
The mine is a very threatening thing for him. He's going to end up there if he doesn't get out. That's where he's going. It's a bigger drive to succeed in his dancing.
You look like a right wanker to me, son.
It's a Cinderella story. It's a complicated and fascinating context for the story of a boy who very simply just wants to dance. But of course, what the child becomes is a magic child. that actually all your hopes and your dreams are invested in.
Within 50 years, social realism has gone from exotic novelty to mainstream attraction. From films that struggle to find backing to films that still struggle to find backing.
Bye, Billy. See ya.
But dressing yesterday's misery up in a tutu seems to be a box office cert. And you can measure what's changed by comparing Billy Elliot to the film that inspired it.
The Billy character in Kes doesn't make it, but in Billy Elliot, it does make it. The only trouble is that now we're so aware of manipulation that you think, oh, I am being dragged into this film. It's a great film, but I'm also, yeah, I'm being manipulated. It was trying to get every tear-jerking moment from it. And I have to admit, I then feel a bit guilty about it.
It's impossible not to look at Billy Elliot in some relationship to Kes.
I'll miss you.
What, can't hear you?
We would also always say that Kes is the template and the great original and the one that, you know, one could only hope to aspire to.
It could have been made by Ken Loach, but at the end of this version of Kes, the bird lives. It was social realism with a happy ending. It was almost as if British cinema was discovering its own wings again.
So Timothy Spall is a minicab driver wondering where it all went wrong in Mike Leigh's All or Nothing next on BBC Two, and you can see Billy Liar in brand new digital format in cinemas near you. For details, log on to bbc.co.uk/British Film.